The idea of our Main Street Defense series is to dive into issues in the defense industrial base that are often talked about, but sometimes from the lens of industry as a whole, or in many cases from the lens of the top companies in industry because they draw so much attention, in some cases deservedly so. But there's a lot else that happens in industry. There are a lot of companies in defense industry, actually quite a bit of diversity in how the industry operates. And the goal of our Main Street Defense series is to dig into some of that diversity and explore it, understand the different dynamics that are at play in different parts of the defense industry, and the ways in which those differences play out on issues like investment, development of technologies, competition, consolidation issues, and teaming within industry, issues of the interplay between the commercial sector of the U.S. economy and the defense and the supply chains that support both, and issues of competing in global markets, which are highly relevant to commercial industry, but also very much in defense industry and a challenge for companies and all parts of the industry. And our series is something that we've decided to do because we think it's important. It's supported by the general support of CSIS members. Also, before we get into the details, I want to give our security announcement that we always give. We have plans worked out in case of emergency. We need to leave this room, and if that were to happen, we'll hear the voice of God telling us that something's happened, and I'll be your security officer and give you guidance on where to go, either out the way you came in or out the back. So I'm very pleased that the initial kickoff speaker to get this series rolling is Mitch Snyder, who is the president and CEO of Bell. He is a member of the corporate leadership team for Textron, which is of which Bell is a subsidiary. Prior to assuming his current position, he was executive vice president for military business at Bell, and so had oversight of all the work they do for their many military customers. He also has led manufacturing centers for Bell and was spearheaded the V-22 program for a time. So he has operated really at every level within industry at Bell, and prior to Bell, also at Lockheed in a variety of capacities, including on the F-16. And he is an electrical engineer with a bachelor's degree from Kansas State. And in his spare time, he's also a member of the Council of Trustees for AUSA, Association of the United States Army. I'm going to turn to Mitch for some opening thoughts and remarks. We've had a chance to chat about Main Street Defense. He's primed and ready to go. And then he and I are going to, as I said, dig into these issues a little bit as part of a dialogue, and then we'll open up to audience questions with our remaining time. So, Mitch, over to you.
I appreciate it, and thank you. And it's an honor to be the first in your series. And so thank you for having me here today. But I think first I want to talk a little bit about the passion I have for what we do. And as you mentioned, I am an electrical engineer. But as a young child, I was fascinated with the Apollo and the mission that NASA had at that time. And so I remember getting up real early in the morning and watching those launches and building Estes rockets as a kid. And again, it wasn't from a pilot perspective, it was the engineering perspective of love to create these amazing machines that could fly. And so that's why I went into engineering, and I've been so thankful that I've had 35 years in the aviation industry creating things that fly. So tremendous passion there for that. And if you think about Bell, and me getting the opportunity to lead Bell, it's been fantastic. And you think about its legacy for such a long time. We're approaching 85 years now of being the company here. We've had so many legacies of being first and very innovative. And if you think back at our history, not very many people remember it because they think about what we more have been today. But we created the first American fighter jet. We broke the sound barrier in the X-1 with Chuck Yeager. We did, certify the first commercial helicopter with the Bell 47. And you think about our tilt rotor industrial base with the XV-3, the XV-15, and then on into the V-22. And then even within that time frame, we did things like the jetpack. We did some dabbles in the hovercraft. We did, if you go look at an X-22, ducted fan aircraft. So there are so many different things that we've done over such a long period of time that was very innovative. You think of our legacy, even when you moved in the helicopter era, in Vietnam with the Hueys and the Cobras. So this tremendous legacy of creating flight. And now if you look to where we're at today, the Bell 525, so we're now working on certifying a commercial aircraft that's going to be the first fly-by-wire helicopter. The V-280, which has been fantastic designing and developing that aircraft and the tremendous capabilities it's already demonstrated. The V-247, the unmanned MUX aircraft that we had been designing for the Marine Corps to be expeditionary and come off of ships, a big Group 5 UAS. The automated pod transport that we've been working on, a tail sitter that converts to a biplane and flies logistics, come back and lands on its tail again. And then the Nexus. We really had a great time with Nexus over the last few years. We unveiled the cabin. We were the first rotorcraft company to go to the Consumer Electronics Show. This past year, we unveiled the Nexus, our version of the air taxi, at the show. And our second year there, we were one of the finalists for Best in Show. So if you think about all those things have done and how we've embraced that innovation and pushed forward with an innovative spirit, we really believed at this point that we had to change the brand. So last year, I felt like we had to drop the helicopter from its name because if you think about everything I just described of what Bell has done, we don't need that modifier. We're just Bell. We create all kinds of amazing vertical lift experiences. And then the brand itself, the logo had to change too. It was more indicative of a helicopter, and we felt like we had to do something new. So with the Shield and the Dragonfly, that's kind of our new brand going forward, and we think it's more indicative of the kind of company we are now today.
Well, thank you. I'd like to pick up the dialogue pretty much right where you segued us in, which is on this idea of being a technology company.
Yeah.
The defense industry, most of them, if not all of them, are technology companies. But we haven't always thought about them. When people talk about the tech sector and tech companies, they're usually not in their minds thinking of a defense industry. And even I would say in the industry, when I talk to folks, they themselves sort of segregate out defense from tech. And I guess there's a variety of things that go into that. But I'm interested about, here you are looking to work in both spaces or be a member of both industries. So you're not shying away from being in the defense industry by any means from what I can see. But you're embracing this idea of Bell as a tech company. So, how does that play out, and does it create challenges for you as a defense company, as well as a technology company, or how does it play out?
So I think, and you're right, when you talk about what we believe, that we're a technology company, you're right. We have used technology for a long time to solve problems. But you're right, today, when you say tech, people usually think of Silicon Valley as tech-type companies. But you think about what they're doing in Silicon Valley and, whether it's these hardware and software, artificial intelligence, autonomy, cyber protection, big network ideas, fast network ideas, the things that they're doing out there. And you look back at us at what we're doing and the vehicles we're creating, we're doing fly-by-wire systems. We're doing fully autonomous and pilot-assisted aircraft. We're using artificial intelligence. We're tying into in the commercial space, we're trying to figure out how we're going to use the 5G network and the digital backbone. So you think of all the things we're doing and the types of people that do that in Silicon Valley and the types of people that we're using to do it there, we definitely match up. And I think the next step of what that is too is you think is speed. How fast can you bring it to bear, right? And so I think with the innovative spirit and being a smaller, more agile company that Bell is, more lean, we believe that we're having the ability to bring these technologies quicker to the market. Our innovation center, we haven't shown everything that we're doing, but we've had some technologies where we've gone from clean sheet to flight within less than a year. And even if you think about the V-280, a big product like that back on the defense side, right, where we went from being on contract to first flight in 54 months, right? And then we've pretty much flown it out here by the end of in 19. So we believe that the technology and type technology that we're using and the speed at which we're going, that's why we believe we're a technology company.
And one of the things that's interesting to me, that the tech industry is very good, as you say, at speed to market. Historically, the defense industry has not been considered to be good at that, although, as you say, there's instances where it's happened,
right.
Where things have actually come from defense industry fairly quickly, but it's not the norm. The norm is slower.
Right.
But there is this interesting dichotomy because Silicon Valley is good at fast, but they also have an ethos which works for them of this minimum viable product. You deliver something that is a subset of ultimately where you probably want to be, so you can move fast, so you can get it going and experiment. But some things are harder than others to do minimum viable, and I think of flight. That's one thing where, flight safety, that minimum is not a minimum, or it's not a very low minimum, it's a pretty high minimum. But as you say, Bell has a history essentially of doing this, of taking new tech in the aviation realm. So how do you marry that up, sort of the safety requirements of airworthiness with speed to market?
Right. And I think and I do this all the time, right? Because I tell our team that when you innovate, you have to take risk. And I would say take smart risks, but you have to take risks, because if you don't take the risk and push hard enough, you're never really going to innovate to the level you want. But when I say take smart risk, as you said, there are certain things about flying that we don't take any risk on, right? There's a whole level of risk mitigation that we work through to make sure that when it gets in the air that it's safe. But if again you go back to the types of aircraft we can deal with right now, we can put autonomous aircraft in the air first before you put pilots in it. So there's things that you could rapidly get into the air, use the autonomy and the fly-by-wire systems to make sure some of these things go first, check it out, make sure it works, and we use that technology and then port it into something that would have pilots in it. So we still think we can rapidly develop there and still then use it in the new aircraft, and we've shown that. And if you think about cycles of learning, which we're doing at Bell right now, if you look, as we leverage our commercial and military business, we went very quickly on bringing a 505, which was taking another aircraft. We used some of the new, and it's some of our digital tool sets that we have now too. So it's training an organization how to develop quicker, bring that commercial aircraft to market quicker. We ported that into our 525 on how we're working that through the system, and then we took that same system and moved it into the V280. And so it was interesting to watch the cycles of learning from going the 505 to the 525 to the V280 to the V247 to the Nexus. And all we're doing is we're training our engineers. We have this blend of commercial and military of how to go quick on the commercial and then port it over to the military side. Again, we will go as fast as we can on the military, but I think you can see on the military, they're wanting more rapid acquisition systems. They want to bring some of these products to the warfighter quicker, and how can we do that? But I think having an organization that's used to doing it quicker helps. And we can prove, as we did with the V280, we can go faster and bring it to the market quicker.
And that kind of brings us to the future vertical lift, which obviously is a topic that immediately comes to mind when you think about Bell. And I'm thinking of it in terms of, again, being in this place in the defense market, the not totally unique, but special place that Bell sits in, managing a generational change in defense technology. And those don't come along real often. It's probably at least historically, been a couple of decades between generational shifts. And in fact, that time has been expanding. So back in the 60s, you might have generational change every 5 or 10 years.
Right.
Now, it's 20 or if you're, sometimes 30 years. But as you say, now we're on I would say arguably we're on the cusp of a generational change with vertical lift. And then there's a lot of interest within the Pentagon more generally and the aviation community to accelerate that effort. So how do you manage that? When your customer now is ready and raring to go, they haven't always been ready and raring to go, but now they are, what challenge does that present?
So I think it's a great challenge, and I think, as I mentioned, I think we're ready. I think we've been prepared, and I think, what we did with the Army on the JMRTD program was a blueprint of how to go fast and how to work collaboratively together between the military and the industry to put something together, lay out a schedule, and adhere to the way we're going to do it. Again, it was fairly industry sponsored as far as funding goes, but it still was totally collaborative. The Army was in all the meetings with us. As we went through our design reviews, as we progressed through the build of the aircraft, it was the government and industry working together. And in 2013, we signed a contract and said we're going to fly in 2017. And we signed the contract, we built the aircraft. They worked with us on this, and we flew it in 2017. We now have over 200 flight hours on the aircraft. It has demonstrated all of its key performance parameters, met or exceeded them. And we submitted our final report to the Army ahead of schedule. and we were done here in 2019, which the JMRTD program was going to run from 2013 to 2019. So here's a case where we said we're going to go fast, we demonstrated the technology, and we achieved it on schedule within budget. And I think, we're set up right now, as you said, they really want to move now, and we've heard them say, hey, we want first unit equipped in 2028 for both FLRAA, the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft and the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft. We'd like to have both on the ramp in 2028, and I think we've shown now that the JMRTD program has informed the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft requirements. We've shown that the technology is ready, it's mature, and we can move into that next phase. And there's an industry day that's going on right now down in Alabama of how we lay out the acquisition strategy to ensure that it happens in 2028, and we're very supportive of the Army to make that happen.
And prototyping, there's various kinds of prototyping, where you can prototype for various different reasons.
Yeah.
You can do a conceptual prototype, an operational prototype, a production prototype. There's different kinds of learning you can do with prototyping. I'd just be interested in your perspective on what you think the JMRTD really demonstrates that we didn't know before, that allows us, as you say, to better inform requirements and to understand, chart the path ahead.
Okay, and we took a different approach, by the way. We said with our technology, as I mentioned, the XV3, the XV15, the V22, so we're very comfortable with the tilt rotor technology, but we said, nobody really ever doubts, the V22 is the most in-demand platform by the United States Marine Corps today. They'll tell you that, the combatant commanders love it and ask for it all the time to support missions. So the speed and the range that the tilt rotor gives you is amazing. The one thing that and of course it was designed in the 80s, right? So we wanted to focus on, acquisition cost, the affordability of it, as well as reliability, maintainability. How do we take this amazing technology, and again, remember, that was really in production the first generation. How do we mature it for a second generation? But not only that, is how do we tailor it specifically to the Army's requirements for air assault? So when we set out to do this aircraft, as you mentioned, you can do all kinds of things. You can try and demonstrate parts of the technology, but we actually wanted to say, we want to do the next generation tilt rotor. And we're going to clean sheet it, and we're going to design and develop it. And if you look at the affordability about the straight wing that we did for lower cost manufacturing, if you look at the way we, and again, a lot of the technology, whereas can you put a straight wing over 6-foot holes on either side for the cabins? Can you fix the engines and not have the engines rotate and have all those components and only have the prop rotor gearbox rotate? The V-tail, a tail dragger. So again, if you think about air assault mission for the Army and what they would want, and then take that tilt rotor technology and put it together, and we'd love anybody to go look at the aircraft if you haven't seen it. Everybody that walks up says, this does not look like a demonstrator. It almost looks even more like, not even a prototype. It looks like almost a production aircraft. And I think the reason it does is because of the digital design tools that are available today, coupled up with how we went about it from the lessons learned. It's an amazing looking aircraft, and it flies extremely well. So in our mind, we didn't do a subscale to try and demonstrate parts of technology. We said, no, we want to go build the real aircraft at full scale, exactly how it would perform that mission. So for us, we believe doing all those different things that we did, and we demonstrated, by the way, the affordability of it, our target price per hour, and the reliability and maintainability. We can change an engine out in less than an hour. You can change the gearboxes out. We made it very functional to be reliable and maintainable. So we believe we have demonstrated all those technologies to this point. Well, by the way, add one more thing is, we did the open system architecture on it, and right after we flew the demonstrators, we came back and added, working with Lockheed, we added the PDAS system, the Pilot Distributed Aperture System, and flew that. We're looking at other technologies that we're going to pump in there and demonstrate as well. So we're showing how rapidly we can incorporate capabilities into the aircraft.
Well, that's just where I wanted to go, is on open mission systems.
Perfect.
And the positive, the benefits. I keep using the word challenge, so I don't want to make it sound like everything is a problem. So I'm going to try and stop saying challenge. But the interesting element of open systems is teaming with a bunch of different partners who are bringing their technology, and maybe that's it's in a rotating list or a constantly changing list. If you're truly doing an open architecture and kind of plug and play,
right.
And as a company like Bell, situated with an industry with the big five, in some cases they may be your suppliers, and obviously some of them are your competitors directly, others may be indirectly, and managing all of that. How does it work?
So yeah, I mean, you're right, and of course everybody's used the term frenemies, but we do. You know, when you work with industry, it's that way everywhere, right? You sometimes team together or you compete. And to me, we always look at Bell. We look at what we're innovating, what kind of technologies we're bringing to bear, and does it make more sense? Do we add more capability, or is there some benefit we get from bringing a partner on board to help us do some of those things? Or is it best to go ahead and compete? So we do assess that at the beginning, and we did that with Team Valor, which Team Valor has been fantastic bringing that organization together. And you think about everybody that we pieced together. And I will tell you, this is another thing I thought was very good about the V280, back to the investing piece of it. When we went out to all these various teams, we said, we want you bringing the best of what you've got. You're an investing teammate, so whatever you've been doing in research and development, rather than us being the prime, the OEM saying, dictating, here's what I want from you, we're saying, here's a capability that we want to bring. What have you been doing in research and development that brings a new capability? So we were kind of a new OEM in that respect of saying, well, how do we bring all the best of all of our partners together to create the V280 technology? Now, with regard to the question on the open system architecture, that was another element that we wanted because we know that's what everybody wants. I mean, you would love to be like a smartphone, right? That I need a new capability, I drop the app in, app goes in, the operating system is unchanged, because that's where a lot of the cost and time takes, is when you have to reintegrate and retest all that because you've added new capability, and if you can drop the app in. So we are starting to demonstrate that open system architecture, and you're right, Lockheed helped us put that one piece in. But we wanted to make it so that if a whole different company came in with a new system, it could go and drop in just as easy and quick in this integration. And I think for the future, you have to be that way. I think change is always going to occur. As you know, technology rapidly changes. If you think of the development span of some of our aircraft, in the normal time you do of 4 or 5, even the 54 months we did, probably technology turned over on electronics twice, well, at least once or twice in that time frame. That's why you have to build the backbone. And instead of avoid and be leery of change, you need to accept that change and embrace the change and build your systems to be modular and be ready for the change. And that's what we want to do, and we're going to try and show it again here on the V280, where we can bring in another, not necessarily the same company, and bring their capability in and demonstrate that we can incorporate that.
Well, and that kind of change puts a lot of requirements on the customer too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we said, there's a lot of willingness, a lot of rhetorical willingness, and I think also actual willingness at the Department of Defense now to set requirements in a more flexible way and to try and set themselves up for a faster pace and a greater rate of change. But how do you see that playing out in terms of the customers that you work with, their ability to really do this, to match on their side of the ledger, mm-hmm. That willingness to say, oh, you found a supplier who's got a really new, interesting capability that totally expands what this aircraft can do, but it wasn't in my requirement. You know,
right.
The deadly phrase that you always hear from the Pentagon, oh, that sounds really great, but it's not in my requirement.
Right.
How do you see that working?
Well, I think, you know, if you look at even what the Army has done by establishing the Futures Command, right? And where did they establish the Futures Command? In Austin, Texas, right? So I think what you're seeing is a more willingness to open up these requirements and say, what is the art of the possible out there in terms of innovation, and how can we bring that to bear? And I think as we sit there, and like I said, if you think about the V280 program, about being a blueprint for success with the JMRTD, it truly was collaboration. The Army was willing to say, we're not going to dictate these requirements to you. We're going to really see what capabilities you have. I mean, they would give us guidance in certain areas, but they really wanted to say, what can you guys bring? How can you open up? And instead of dictating requirements, dictate what I want in terms of capability and mission, and let us work with the rest of our industry partners to figure out how we bring that to you. And one thing that you know they absolutely want is the ability to have that flexibility to rapidly incorporate new capabilities into the platform. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, to me, looking at where the Army is headed right now, as well as the other services, there's a willingness with Act Reform to not dictate the answer to us, but to allow us to innovate with them and collaborate with them on a path forward. There'll still be certain boundaries they give us, but there is a lot more ability now to innovate differently, and I'm excited about where we're headed with this.
Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that I think folks will see as we have more of these Main Street Defense events, one of the things that's a characteristic of a lot of companies that are in this field is that there's a lot of commercial work. And so classically, we think of defense industry as being kind of largely divorced from the commercial sphere. There's some notable exceptions, but that's kind of I think the standard narrative. That's not at all true of Bell.
No.
And so I'd be interested how you see how that plays out in the Bell case, of whether it's hard to be both a commercial and a defense company, or is it core to who you are?
I will tell you it's core to who we are. And we have totally embraced it, and we flex in size, right now we're probably 65-35 military commercial. But you think about the products and the way we go about doing things, and I will tell you our people, we move constantly people between, like there'll be program managers on military and they move over to commercial. And some companies actually separate their commercial and military businesses, and we don't. It's all pulled together. So we really have kind of an overlap between our military, commercial, and our innovation team, where they're constantly moving and we're moving product through that. And you're right, it's different. It's 1 week I'll be in the Pentagon meeting with senior officials, and the next week I'm out in Silicon Valley sitting down with Dara at Uber, having discussions on air taxis and mobility, and meeting with governments on different mobility. And so it's fun, and our team loves it. The fact that we're able to leverage it, and as I mentioned earlier, there's some things that we do on that commercial side that move much quicker. We can make decisions and go fast, and bring our technology to bear quicker. And the military adds discipline into our process. And I've loved watching as we move our talent back and forth between these, that if you stay too long on one side, you'll get it kind of locked in, and it's kind of fun to flip them. And some of the commercial guys will bring over this, hey, let's go fast. We can do this. Where in some cases we may have needed a little more discipline on the commercial effort that we're doing. So I think it works really well to move them back and forth. But I think what it really does for us, it really brings a lot of creativity to the market, that we're seeing what the commercial demands are in the world, and we're seeing what the military demands on the world. And it's pretty interesting. For example, with the automated pod transport aircraft that we did. We started talking to a lot of companies in the commercial world about whether it's logistics movers or even like moving different medical supplies between hospitals and things. I mean, we're not talking about the last mile for us, in that piece. It's more about distribution. We've actually signed a deal in Yamato in Japan to start moving things, so we're doing some demonstrations with those. But we actually then go over to the military side and say, hey, what would the military be wanting in this kind of logistics movement? And then we can actually develop curves and kind of hit sweet spots that says, if we develop this kind of aircraft, it actually has commercial application as well as military application. Even Nexus and air taxi, when you have an aircraft that it's extremely quiet, safe, whether it's hybrid electric, that flies, there's going to be military applications for it as well. So we actually totally embrace it. It's our core of having a military and commercial business be together. And
you've kind of talked about that has implications for the workforce. It sounds like mostly positive.
Yes.
But it's a competitive world out there.
It is.
For engineering talent, for all kinds of talent, but certainly for engineering talent. Does it help to be a company that spans these spaces when it comes to competing for workforce?
I personally believe it does, and I think it's because, and we mentioned earlier, we were talking about, we recently had a group of college interns in that we talked to, and it's interesting to listen of why they came to Bell and wanted to intern at Bell, and it's all over the spectrum. But because we have a tremendous amount of veterans in our workforce from our history of who we are and what we continue to do on products, and there's those folks that really want to be part of that, and then we have a lot of the young folks that are absolutely enamored with urban air mobility and the future of the way we can move folks through space and quickly and support the environment. And then this innovation piece of it as well. We do a lot of work with on the medical side with the medical helicopters, saving lives there. So when you have this broad spectrum to offer, you can say, hey, as an engineer or whatever discipline you are, you can come in here and be part of Bell, and you get all these experiences. 1 week you may be working, or one couple of years you may be working in the military, and then you jump over, and the next thing you know, you're working with medical helicopters, or then you jump over and you're working with Uber on air taxis. So I think it's a great talent draw for us to be able to show that you can come here and not get locked in anywhere, and you have the ability to move around. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of excitement about that as far, it's, especially I can tell you, for us, with the V280, what the V280 is doing and what we're developing there, and the Nexus, what we did at the Consumer Electronics Show, and what we're pressing there, those are two big draws for technology.
All right, I have one more question of mine that I'm going to ask, and then so I'm just going to get the audience warmed up and prepared, get your questions ready, especially those of you in the front row who are at high risk of being selected early. You know who you are, so get ready. So the last question I wanted to throw at you was on consolidation.
Yeah.
So it appears, I'm going to make this case, that there is potentially another wave of consolidation coming along for defense industry. I would argue very different from the consolidation we saw in the 1990s, early 2000s, the Last Supper, where it was, kind of about, people that were in the same industry, collapsing together, I guess would be one way of putting that, or building up. And this is different. What you see is companies kind of that have been in adjacent businesses, but theoretically different businesses, now either maybe deciding they're in the same business and wanting to merge, or deciding that by merging they can create a new business that's greater than the sum of the parts. So I'd just be interested in what you see in this landscape. Not to say the Bell's out there looking to acquire, I don't know, but what do you see happening in the industry and how it's structuring?
Well, you're right, and you watch it, right, as you see it's happening. It's interesting to see even big move together with big. To see it happen and play out. So we definitely keep our eye on it and watch what's going on there. But I can tell you that Bell, for what we're doing right now, as I just listed the myriad of products that we're working on, we're really focused on what we do and our strategy and our indigenous growth. And we feel like if we focus there that we'll be extremely successful. So again, it's not that we aren't watching what's going on around us, but that's where we're focused right now is our indigenous growth and what we're doing.
All right, I will now open up to audience questions. We'll have microphones that get brought around. And so those of you who are selected, tell us who you are, ask a brief question. And we'll start up front here with Vago.
It's coming.
Yeah, nobody's ever accused me of not speaking loud enough.
But we want our online audience to hear your
Thanks
voice,
very much.
Vago.
Yes, exactly. Vago Muradian with Defense and Aerospace Report. Andrew, thanks very much for the session. Mitch, good seeing you again. Textron has made a point of investing. For example, if with the Scorpion aircraft, you guys pouring a lot of investment into a whole series of new products. The gas and energy cycle didn't work, but some of these airplanes also will have strong legs in VIP and other markets, as we heard when we were at the Paris Air Show. Do you think the department is rewarding folks and has sort of a clarity of understanding of what it wants its future industrial base to look like? Because occasionally when you look at the programs and the way they're going about it and the kind of investment industry is making that go somewhat unrewarded, makes you wonder at what point does your boss look at you and the board look at him and go, hey, you guys are investing quite a lot of money, but we're not getting the kind of returns that we think and we deserve for having taken that risk and put that skin in the game.
So I think, and again, if you say in department, you're talking specifically about the defense side of our business, because of course on the commercial side we can invest and we bring it to market and the market plays out, right, on the commercial side. So we're continuing to make those investments. On the defense side, I think we're extremely, I would say very optimistic about where it's headed right now on the defense side, because again, we did invest in the JMRTD heavily, and you see the fact that now that we've showed the services what we can do in that time frame, and again, a very short time frame to go from absolutely clean sheet to an aircraft that's exceeded 300 knots, level one handling capabilities, faster, all the things that we've done with that aircraft in a short period of time, that the technology is ready, and the fact that the Army has moved out with the future vertical lift and said we're going to do this, on the future long-range assault aircraft. Like I said, there's an industry day going on. They've laid out to us how they want to move that acquisition along, and not only to move through either the other transaction authority or mid-tier acquisition authority. How do we get within the next few years to actually get into a milestone B or eventually maybe a milestone C production to have first unit equipped in 2028? So I think the services are taking effect. The Army specifically is saying, yeah, we're going to reward you for this work that you've done. And again, the reward is the competition for us, right? That's where we really want to be. We're extremely proud of what we've done. Our workforce is fantastic at where they've brought this aircraft to, our manufacturing engineering teams. It's done exactly what we expected and more, and we're ready to go to that next phase. And on the future, attack reconnaissance aircraft, again, the Army laid out a strategy. They award to 5. There's going to be a down select next February to 2 and keep going. So I believe now we're putting these investments in there, and the programs are coming along like we expected them to. So, yeah, I think we're in a good place now. Okay.
Okay. Sydney?
Another professionally loud person. Hi, Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense.
Okay.
You guys are working on a whole range of different aircraft and technologies. I want you to sort of address how those things fit together when you've got, because once upon a time we thought of, oh, Bell, they're the tilt rotor people, right?
Yeah.
And, by going for, Bell 525 for FARA, and Nexus, the transport pod, none of those things are tilt rotor. It sounds like tilt rotor doesn't scale down that far.
Right.
And likewise, those great, C-130 quad tilt rotor concept art things from the 90s never materialized. So, how does this portfolio of different technologies, including your conventional helicopter like the 525, fit together? What's good for what? And, is tilt rotor, still the centerpiece, or is it just one niche in this portfolio?
So I would say that if you think about the tilt rotor, and especially if you talk about the V280 where we're moving next, that's still kind of the centerpiece. But you think about what a V280 is, right? It's taking off vertically, and then it's moving to forward flight and getting on a wing and be very efficient. So that's our concept. If you think about the tail sitter, it's taking off vertically, it's getting onto a bi-wing and staying on wing. If you think about the Nexus, it's using ducted fans, taking off vertically, converting, getting on wing, and be efficient. So back when you're asking where the string is there, I think if you talk about those particular products, where Bell niche has been is we know how to take things off vertically and convert to forward flight and basically convert into airplane type modes. And so whether you think it's the Nexus or the V280, the V22, the automated pod transport, a lot of those flight control type technologies that we're working on is the phase of being in a vertical kind of helicopter mode and being in an airplane mode, and the key and the critical secret sauce is the conversion in between of how do you make that go in between there. So I think that's a common thread. If you think about what we're doing on the helicopter side, you think about the 525 and the fly-by-wire system and moving on into using that kind of technology on FARA. The flight controls that we're writing, the V280 team is moving back and forth between V280 and FARA and FLRAA. Once you know how to write flight controls and you write autonomy, we've almost created an autonomy team that can make anything be autonomous, whether it's a conventional type helicopter or it's a tilt rotor or a ducted fan aircraft. So there is a lot of commonality in our engineering around autonomy and artificial intelligence, if we're looking to detect and avoid. So there's a lot of common things that goes on in a basic core of what we're designing that apply to maybe different products the way they fly. But we believe there's a common thread there. The tilt rotor is still foundational in what we do, though.
I'm going to pick one from a little bit farther back here, and then I'll come back over back to the front.
Hi, Jackson Barnett with FedScoop. Could you speak more to how you're preparing for AI and machine learning to change your company and your industry?
So that's a great question. So we're doing two things. One is we're starting to build a core team at Fort Worth. And, if you start off with what we've got right now, we've always had teams that know how to do the fly-by-wire systems. And of course, the next step to fly-by-wire systems is autonomy. And it's interesting the design because in the past, the way you've designed things, you design things as almost like there's going to be a man in the loop, and then you autopilot it. The way we're designing things now it's an autonomous aircraft, and then we can bring pilot in the loop after that, mission manager. So it's a whole different thought process of thinking how we're going to do that. So it's almost autonomy is built in. And of course, when you get into the artificial intelligence or the decision-making piece of it, we're involving more sensors onboard sensors on the aircraft, so that there's things going on, as I mentioned, like detect and avoid. If you're looking at things, or we're looking out for things, how do we do that? How do we help mission manage? But you eventually are starting to train the system of how to understand what's going on and do some decision making. We also are partnering, and I won't say who the companies are right now, we're partnering with companies, Silicon Valley type companies, that also have progressed pretty far in that space. So we're working collaboratively with them also of how to bring much quicker so we don't have to reinvent the wheel in some cases, whether you're talking about the digital backbone, interfacing with 5G networks, or artificial intelligence. There's some things we can bring to bear quicker and match it up with some of the autonomy work that we've been doing in the fly-by-wire work. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, Steve Trumbull with Aviation Week. I'm interested in your thoughts and maybe vision for the transition or application of distributed propulsion, hybrid electric or fully electric, autonomous or not autonomous, semi-autonomous type technology to the military sphere. There's JTARs on the books for the Army, ULSA for the Marine Corps. Nothing really yet I see for urban taxis, maybe some SIBRs out there and that sort of thing. But what do you see as the difference between the commercial application of it versus the military application of it, and how this will play out?
Well, that's a great question. So, and as you mentioned, we're working everything. Our goal, if we talk urban air mobility right now with what we're doing on Nexus, or some of the work we're doing with the automated pod transport, the goal is to be all electric. And someday, our vision is that the battery sources will be there that we need to be. Unfortunately, right now, a charged battery and a dead battery weigh the same. And so, when you think about flight with turbine engines, at least the fuel's burning off and it's getting lighter as you go and you get more range. So I think when we're looking at our battery technology right now, I feel like, we're driving hard to be all electric. We believe that hybrid right now is probably the place to get right now. So you have the combination of the electric and the turbine engine in there. But we believe we can make this taxi work. And really what it comes down to, specifically about your question, is it comes down to payload and range difference. If you talk about urban air mobility and you hop around cities, you may be talking, the demand may only be a 60-mile range to get there, right? But we'd still like to have speed and go on wing. That's why you see Nexus being able to get on wing and still be moving quickly, 150 miles an hour over the cities to get there. And that's all about turn time. To get there. And again, we're appealing to the masses. That's moving a lot of people quickly. Our aircraft's 4-passenger. But range and payload is where it gets to. The military is going to want something that goes much further than that. So that's why when you look at what we're designing right now, we may be able to get there with all electric for some of the smaller hops within the cities. The other piece you got to worry about is charge time, how hot everything gets when you're charging it. So our engineers continue to work on that with our teammates on how do we get a sweet spot right now for the technology that's available today. But if you think about it, when we design this with the ducted fans, all electric, the fly-by-wire, the sense and avoid, the triple redundancy, operating the 5G network, everything that we're going to do, ADSB, to get it redundant and be safe, you go to the power management system, and on the back half, you can add batteries as the technology develops. You can add a turbine engine. So this one vehicle could be certified and fly with all this part of the technology working, and we just change out the back end as technology develops. So when you go to the military, I think, though, we're going to have to look at more of how do we get more range and more payload out of these type of vehicles. But the fact that they land, you turn them off, they're electric. There's no startup, get the engines warm, get things going, the gearboxes, that doesn't there. You land, you turn the motors off, you get on, there's nothing moving around you, turn it back on, you take off and you fly. So I believe that we'll get there, but it'll probably be more near term if we have military application hybrid. Okay.
Let's go on the way back, and then I'll come back over to the aisle here.
Hi, Marcus Weisgerber with Defense One. For years, I think many of us viewed the future verticalists as kind of being a shootout between you guys and Sikorsky, maybe Boeing. But now with FARA, we're seeing non-traditional primes like L3 Harris and some of the prototyping shops getting involved. So my question for you is, how do you assess your competition?
So again, the way I always look at it and the way I approach it with my team, we're aware of the competition, but we're really not focused on the competition. We're focused on ourselves. and our product and what we want to bring to the competition. And I think if you look at what we did with the 525 and that capability, again, you see an aircraft that's got over 1,100 flight, actually over 1,200 flight hours on it now, four test aircraft. We've really matured that fly-by-wire system on the aircraft. And again, the rotor blade technologies, other technologies in that aircraft have been matured. And we can port that into an aircraft that the Army, I think, will really love. And again, if you look at Bell's legacy, we did the scout mission, for the Army for a very long time with our Kiowa, for the OH-58. So we know the Army, we know the scout mission, and we have the technology with our 525 and our fly-by-wire systems that are very mature. And again, another thing that I think we feel good about what we've been doing is these development cycles. Like I said, the 505, the 525, the V280, the V247, we've got these cycles of going. So I'm aware of the competition. A lot of great companies out there competing against us. But we do like what we're doing right now, and we feel very good about what our offering will be for the Army.
Okay, here on the aisle, if you're...
Hi, I'm Richard Whittle, an author, and here today with Breaking Defense, trying to help Sydney. I actually have a couple of follow-up questions I'd like to ask you, if I may have two.
Sure.
And one is on the defense consolidation. I'm wondering, looking back on it, how do you think over the years whether that's been a good thing for the defense industry, for the taxpayer? What's the effect been on competition? What's the effect been on innovation? That's my one question. My other question is, are there really going to be air taxis in 5 years?
How about I ask you the second one first? So I think the air taxi is it's going to take a time. And again, it's going to have to play out, because I think Bell right now, I feel like we have the technology to get a vehicle flying. But when you think about the whole infrastructure required to support an air taxi, it's not just flying the vehicle. We have to have, right now there's no even regulation how to certify it. Is it a helicopter? Is it an airplane? How do I certify it with the regulatory authorities? I know EASA is working on how they would move out on a certification, how you do unmanned air traffic management. And by the way, ours is not going to be unmanned first. It'll be able to fly autonomously, but it will have a pilot in there on board. But we believe that when you think about the FAA regulations for operations, certification, you think about the city infrastructures. There's not vertiports all over the cities today. And by the way, we've been working with a lot of cities. Where do you put the vertiports? So, in a system that, mass transits and then puts you in positions where they end up jammed up again, trying to get away from the mass transit systems. We don't want to do that. We want to put the vertiports in places where it relieves traffic. So if you think about city infrastructure, regulatory authorities, and public acceptance, frankly, the biggest barrier always been to me for helicopters in the cities has been noise pollution. That's something we have to address. So we're pressing hard for the way I'd answer it. We're pressing hard to have the technology, and we've said we're trying to have our technology ready in the 2025 timeframe. But that is all dependent on FAA, and can we get there with the regulatory authorities? It's getting the vertiports built and such. But I believe within the 20s you're going to see taxis, right? I think you're going to see them flying. 5 years is a short order when you think about what we have to get done. On the defense consolidation, I don't think I can really answer whether it's done one or the other. The only thing I can tell you is that a company like ours, I love the ability and the flexibility to be creative and innovative and bring things constantly to bear. I think that's what's been great about being a smaller company like we are and being innovative and creative. We can go fast. We're not caught up in a bigger company that has a lot more structure in it that drives you there. But you're going to you'll get creativity through us. You'll get innovation through us for sure.
And what about the impact on competition?
Well, I think, again, the competition's showing up, right? I've got, even on ferry, you look, there's going to be 5 competitors there, and that didn't even count Airbus and some of the other European, Leonardo, others. So if you've still got 5 or 6 people, 7 people, at least you're down selected to 5, we're going to down select to 2, so we still have competition. Okay.
And I think this will probably be our last question, so make it a good one.
No pressure.
Greg Sanders, CSIS. So you had touched on some of the mid-tier OTAs. You've also emphasized speed. A lot of the goals of current acquisition reform efforts are very much leaning into better speed. What's your assessment of those tools and where that's going? And do you think that's been able to let you try to bring in some of the speed that you think is one of your strengths?
Well, I think, we're kind of at the leading edge of it, right? I mean, they're just now really getting started with this. I guess if we come back and we talk in a year or so, I'll tell you whether it really played out like we hoped it to. But, I know they're committed. If you look at where, if I talk specifically future vertical lift now, the Army, they laid an acquisition plan. We said we're going to do it on these dates, and they released the documents on those dates. They released the RFI. It was amazing, even on future long-range assault aircraft, the RFI came out and said, you got a week. Submit your response on an RFI, and we did. And and the reason we were was because we were prepared, right? We've been waiting for this moment for quite some time on the B-280. But, they're laying in tight dates. They're saying, here's when we're doing things, and they're following through with them. And we're looking forward, as you know, we're looking forward to the down select next February for the fair aircraft, and we're looking forward, coming out of this industry day this week, to see the acquisition plan laid out. But in both cases, for both aircraft, they are driving very hard to have first unit equipped by 2028, which is the goal of the United States Army there. So everything we're doing right now says they're headed down that path. And of course, we'll see how things go today in the Congress, but the budgets are being laid in to match with them as well. And I think the Army did a good job. They talked about where they not only did the funding come from, but they created their own funding by cutting things that they felt were necessary to get modernization. So the speed of acquisition matched up with the budget that they're putting in. All signs are pointing towards this is going to work.
Well, great. Well, Mitch, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to ask the audience to thank you, but hold on for a second. I'm going to say a few more words before we wrap up, because as I mentioned, this is part of Main Street Defense Series. This is the first one. There will be others. We have a nice lineup ready to come for you. We think the next one will be in September. We'll get the invitation out formally on that in not too distant future. And we're going to keep digging. I think you'll find that every one of these sessions digs into a slightly different set of issues based on the company it is. But we think when we get through it, there'll be some common threads, and hopefully it'll stir further discussion throughout the community. And again, Mitch, thank you very much for joining us today. Really enjoyed the discussion.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
And please join me.